Okay, well, welcome to our another edition of the Zoom Rock Room. I think pretty much everybody is our regular members. Still call you members, although you don't pay anything to be here. But anyway, I'm apparently I'm going to be soloing tonight. Mel is without electric, and the Chipmunks don't want to run the wheel to get the electric going. So um, she'll pop in here if she can, but I don't see her right now. So anyway, I was going to talk about we were going to talk about some winter sports tonight as a intro, and I'll still tell you the story I was going to get into tonight. I was a real hellion when I was younger. It was winter with sleds and toboggans, and my favorite story was um, we went to Caledonia State Park every winter for a church retreat. There was a family that owned a cabin very near Caledonia State Park. In fact, right across the street from the Caledonia Golf Course. And a couple of their fairways are a great toboggan sledding hills. And I was driving a toboggan with three other people who were in the back one time. And when I was younger, I didn't have much confidence in myself. So as I was going down the fairway at a high speed, that the narrow golf course bridge over the creek at the bottom was getting to be a little bit larger as I was approaching it. And my lack of confidence told me I'm not going to make it across that bridge. And I kind of yelled the old bail out. And everybody else stayed on the toboggan. I bailed out. I went into the creek, and I saw the toboggan go skating across the bridge in fine shape. So my lack of confidence. So anyway, let's get started here. And okay. So of course the Zoom Rock Room. This is like edition number 117. We're into now in 2024, second one of the new year sort of thing. And like I said, we'll probably miss Melanie tonight. She's at home playing in the dark, sort of thing. So the Zoom Rock Room always sponsored by Lair Architect of Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and Lair Architect at yahoo.com if you want to send them an email and thank them for allowing us to do this without any charge to you. So they're doing well after the holidays, and I guess it's kind of cold out there in Lake Havasu right now also. Of course, our buddy Dirtman on board again tonight. He doesn't have a video ready to be shown tonight, but he will have one in the future, I saw. And we do thank Andrew for all of his contributions of his Dirtman reports, or when we have special events. He usually does some highlighting videos with that. So make sure you go to extremecody.com to check out all their videos that he has done over the few years here. Of course, the Institute down in Waynesboro is we are a big supporter of the Institute, and they are still in their capital campaign, probably coming to the end of their capital campaign very soon, acquiring new land. It is theirs actually, and there will be some big news about the Institute coming up here in the very, very near future. We hope to have Tracy, the executive director, join us when that news becomes available. So one of their wintertime programs that they do is the Appalachian Trail Family Hike. Going to start January 28th. 2 hours on the Appalachian Trail. And so if you want to check it out, go to natureandcultureinstitute.org and sign up. Anyway, it doesn't cost any money to walk on the Appalachian Trail, but the Institute does fabulous jobs with all kind of different programming for all ages. And of course, part of the Institute is I and Steve Lindbergh this year are teaming up to do the annual geology bus trip for the Institute on May the 11th. Still don't have a price for that. Hopefully next time I see you, we will have a cost for the trip. But we will be leaving Waynesboro at 8:30 and going to New Paris. I didn't change that yet. New Paris Quarry near Bedford and the Coral Caverns, which is also near Bedford. 2 stops with some other sub stops amongst all that. So that's gonna be a fun day. Be back by 4:30 back to Waynesboro that day. So stand by for more information on that. Crystal Cove Collective with Mike and Krista found at 2208 Gettysburg Road in the Lower Allen Shopping Center is one of our sponsors when we need specimens to send out for contests. They always are happy to donate to us. And also they are at the Morning Sun Market in Thomasville, which is just a few miles west of York, Pennsylvania. Red Lion Telescopes have come back on board as a sponsor, and there's their information right there. It actually is a showroom in a house, and he has all kind of models and a range of telescopes as far as prices are concerned. If you're looking for a good beginning telescope, Red Lion Telescope is the place to go, and they'll help you out with that. Our schedule for future is that we're going to be our buddy Ken Fraser, who's a regular in the room, is going to be coming on board next time with his travel log to Easter Island and neighborhoods. Talk about the 2 mysterious civilizations. Later in February, Greg Herman. Some of you may remember Greg Herman from doing a talk for us about 2 years ago on the impact craters around the world. And he has a totally different theory from everybody else, which I really like. But he's going to be talking about the lunar multi-ringed impact basins, a project that he's just actually wrapping up. This will probably be the first time that he'll talk about his results on his research on the moon impact crater. March the 5th, Dean Rocchio is going to be back with us again. He was with us in November, talk about the new Ringo site, and he's going to talk about erythrorads, which is another one of his big subjects. And Dean is a phenomenal high school student that is going to be going someplace as far as his knowledge with paleontology. March the 19th, this should be a fun show. Kurt Freihoff from Kutztown University going to talk about mineralogical things that you can see with the scanning electron microscope and the EDS scope. So you're going to be looking at really small.
Do me a favor and save you one more piece.
So everybody want to mute yourself?
I mean, out of the fridge.
I don't have Mel here.
Leave it out of the fridge.
If you want to mute yourself, that'll be fine. April 2nd, I'm kind of holding that date for somebody that is on winter break right now for another week or so. So, and April 16th, if you ever know what the Pennsylvania Geologic Survey library looks like, or what does the library at the Pennsylvania Geologic Survey have, Jody Smale is going to be with us to give you a tour of the library. That should be fun too. You'll be surprised at exactly what's in the library. So anyway, that's our schedule through April, actually, when the leaves will just be starting to come back onto the trees. So finally, I talked about this last time just to make you aware that that on April 8th, there's a solar eclipse. Pretty much every citizen in the United States is going to be along that red and blue line, uh, along the line of totality. And we may have some field reporters uh, coming in to talk to us about their results. We'll have one before and one right after the April 8th. But anyway, we're going to have an event at Cador State Park in Hanover. It's not along the line of totality, but we're going to be seeing 91% of an eclipse here in York County. And that'll be held at the Marina Launch area at Cador State Park. So, with that in mind, I'm gonna stop sharing and doing some research for something I was working on. I discovered in the span of 11 years, 115 people died in a weightlifting accident in a gym. Isn't that hard to believe? 115 people died in weightlifting accidents in the gym. In the same 11-year period, only one person died eating a donut. So make a good choice there, folks. Okay. Okay. That was supposed to be funny. But anyway. So I don't have anything else to say at this point in time. So oh, yeah, I do. Dick Cooper don't want to tell the joke, but I'll tell it for him. Dick asked his wife the other day what she wants for Valentine's Day. She said, diamonds, diamonds, diamonds. So Dick bought her a deck of cards. So there you go, guys. If you're looking for a Valentine's present, buy her a deck of cards. Yeah. It wasn't mine. I just passed it on. Okay. All right. Let's move on here before I get thrown out of here. Out of here tonight. Okay. I gotta give credit where credit is due. Diana Geis, on one of her travels into the New England states, met our speaker for tonight, Shane Shaw, and Diana approached him about doing a Zoom Rock Room program. So all the connections were made, and Shane volunteered to do this program about what he does actually as kind of a summer job. He is a tour director, or not a tour guide, I'm sorry, at the Rock of Ages Quarry, which is in Graniteville, Vermont. How about that? Graniteville, Vermont, right? And it's one of the most popular, in fact, it's the world's leading granite quarrier and memorial manufacturer in the whole world. So if you're going to take a vacation to New England, go through Vermont, stop at the Rock of Ages Quarry. They will give you a tour. Before I go any further, I do want to let you know on my background, that is the picture of Stone Mountain, Georgia. Maybe some of you have been Stone Mountain before. That's just east of Atlanta. It's the world's largest outcrop of granite. Around the base, it's a 3.5 mile circumference, and the Stone Mountain stands at roughly 875 feet above the valley. And there's two ways to get to the top. You can either take the tram car, the cable car to the top, or you can do as I did. You can walk about a 1 mile path up the hill to the very top. My wife took the cable car, and I took the walk because I don't like heights, and granite is very hard when you hit it. So I was getting smart. So anyway, check out Stone Mountain, Georgia, if you're down in that area. It's really a neat place to go. And of course, the Civil War carvings onto the rock, the Confederate carvings of Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson, and Robert E. Lee are there. And I know in the summertime they actually do special laser programs at nighttime. Anyway, back to Shane. He spends his school year actually as a long-term substitute teacher in Williamstown, Vermont. So he goes to work basically every day, and they find something for him to do basically every day as a substitute teacher. Ironically, I found it interesting. He's not a geologist. He's not into earth science and too much, but he actually got his Bachelor of Science, Environmental Science from Lyndon State College in Lyndonville, Vermont. He got his master's degree in botany from Miami University. Mel Tracy is going to be upset that she's not here tonight. And he got his ABD certificate in botany from the University of Hawaii. So he certainly has spread his wings around there a little bit for his education. And he's been part of several publications with a topic to do with botany. One of his publications actually was highlighted in the BBC Wildlife magazine and used as a public display at the Denver Botanic Garden. So if you've ever been to Denver Botanic Garden, you may have seen some of Shane's work there. So without further ado, let's welcome Shane Shaw.
Thank you.
All right. You getting it all set up.
Yes, we
There
are.
you go. There you go.
And there's our beautiful logo. And like we said, it was located in Graniteville, Vermont, which is kind of a small town. Most people would consider it near Barrie, Vermont. So if you're coming up, look for Barrie, Vermont. And just to kind of give you a location where it is, you can see on the map the little star. We're a little bit south of Barrie. And that's also south from our capital of Montpelier. And what I'd like to do is just kind of tell you a little bit about our factory and the products we make, go over our history, a little bit about the quarrying itself, how they used to quarry, how they quarry today, and why we quarry here to begin with, so how that granite got here, and what makes our granite very unique. So here's a nice little picture of our factory. The long square building is a factory, and the round circle is our nice tour center. The factory has over 250 people, and they work year-round. They make markers, monuments, mausoleums, and industrial equipment. Now, this building is very large. There's a catwalk in the front, and the top two pictures are from the catwalk, and that's where you'll see them making markers. And toward the back and in the other building is where they make the mausoleums and other equipment. The building in the the building in the back is one of the largest or heaviest buildings per square foot in Vermont. And here's some of the pictures of some of the things that we make. Of course, we make the monuments in the center. Here's a civic monument down in Pennsylvania, the 9/11 Memorial. We make mausoleums. In the upper right, that's actually a granite paper roller. Rock of Ages has their own patent on how they do it. Instead of being a single shaft in the middle, they have a bunch of shafts on the side. It keeps it from flexing. And they like using granite in the paper industry. It beats up the pulp. And being granite, it's very heavy, and the paper pulp doesn't stick to it. And on the bottom is something called a surface plate. And these are very large tables that are they can be thousandths of an inch off from one side to the other side. NASA has purchased them in the past. They put part of the James Webb Telescope together using one of our tables, and our people that worked way in the back was so proud of that they walked all the way to the front to the tour center just to tell us that that's what they make. But those aren't the only cool things if you come to the factory to see that we do a couple other neat things. In the 1950s, a cruise industry came up to us and they said, we're tired of replacing our wood bowling lanes. Rock of Ages, can you make one out of granite? And that picture on the left is the only granite bowling lane in the world. Now, they did discover one bad problem with a granite bowling lane, because when you throw a regular bowling ball on it, it ends up chipping and breaking the bowling balls. So they said no, thank you. And what we did is we used plastic pins and rubber balls to bowl with. So you can come up and do a few frames of bowling. And note that you also want to come in a group because you're going to be the ball return and pin setup. So it's nice to have a group so you don't have to walk so much. And the other picture is this nice little bin that's next to the factory, and that is full of what we call grout. And grout is just small pieces of stone that are waste product from our Rock of Ages manufacturing. And these are the small pieces. And of course, up in the quarry, you could have a 500-pound block. And we put these in there to take home for souvenirs. We do recommend that you bring your car because we do like to make sure that you take a few tons home with you when you come and take them. Now notice this is mostly a gray granite, but if you look really close, you can see a few other colors in there. And that's because as they're manufacturing, someone might fall in love with a color stone, say cameo rose, and that comes up from Georgia. They send that all the way up to be manufactured. And while they're working on it, they make a few pieces of grout and they'll put that in the bin for people to take home for souvenirs. Now, we started in 1885 by these three gentlemen, Mr. Botwell, Milne, and Varnum. Now, Botwell and Varnum were both Vermonters. They were train engineers, but Mr. Milne was an immigrant. He came over from Scotland and he worked in the granite industry. Now, these three men were working with other people in various forms in the granite industry when they finally met one another and they said, let's work together. We have the same dream. We want to be the biggest and best granite producers in the world. So what they ended up doing is selling off all of their holdings and they bought one quarry. And they formed a company called Botwell, Milne, and Varnum. Now, at that time, they only sold granite. They didn't have any manufacturing plants. And because the granite was of a high quality, they were able to put a little warranty on it so all the manufacturing plants would buy that. But by 1914, they said, we need to start advertising to be the biggest and best. And they hired a firm from Burlington, Vermont, and they came up with that round logo you see on the right-hand side that says Rock of Ages. Now, they're a little hesitant to use this in their advertising because Rock of Ages is a very famous hymn, and they didn't want to offend anyone, but they got thinking about that hymn, and they got thinking about what their company wanted to represent, and that's human life and human spirit. And so they went with it, and it worked so well that they ended up changing the name of their company to Rock of Ages in 1925. Now, these three men were smart, and the people who have followed them were just as smart. They started buying more manufacturing plants and quarries, and in the 1930s, they were the largest producers of granite in the Barrie area. By 1940s, they bought some more quarries. They bought one called the E.L. Smith in 1947. And the reason I bring this one up is that if you were here, that's the one that has the observation deck currently. But by 1986, they bought another one called the Wells Lambs Quarry. Now, by purchasing the Wells Lambs Quarry, gave Rock of Ages the sole ownership of the granite called Barrie Gray Granite. So if you see Barrie Gray Granite anywhere in the world, you know it had to come from Rock of Ages because they own it all. Now, over time, we were finally sold to a couple different parent companies. In 2016, the last parent company that bought us is called Polycor. They're very large companies. They have over 60 quarries throughout the United States, North America, and Europe, about a handful, and a bunch of manufacturing plants. And their headquarters is in Quebec, Canada. Now, today, Rock of Ages has 3 active quarries in Vermont. They have the Adam Perry and E.L. Smith. Both of them are here in Graniteville, Vermont, and they do the Berry Gray granite. But if you drive about 40 miles south on Interstate 89, you'll come to a small town called Bethel, Vermont, and they actually have their own quarry there, but their granite looks different. It's a very white granite with big black flecks in it. It looks a little bit like cookies and cream ice cream. It's a very popular granite right now to use in architectural purposes. Very popular in Europe right now, in the Middle East. Being white, it reflects all that hot sun. And Polycor would like us to go carbon neutral by 2025. They have Rock of Ages planting trees, trying to reduce our carbon footprint, and very important for the tour guides. They say we're going to get a new car, and I'm hoping that they're going to pony up and get us a Tesla. Come back in a year and we'll see if I have a Tesla. And here's a picture of this is a great part with being online. We don't have to hop in our cars and drive, but this is from the observation deck, and we're looking at the E.L. Smith Quarry from the observation deck. We're looking due west, and if people are familiar with Vermont a little bit, this tall mountain in the back is Camel's Hump, so that's what we're looking at. Now, as we look at this quarry, there's a couple things of note. This quarry wall that you see is 200 feet tall, and if you go from the water line to the bottom of the quarry, it's another 400 feet. That's 600 feet in total relief. That makes this the world's deepest working dimensional granite quarry in the world. This quarry is split into 2 different sides. The right-hand side is the older vertical side, and the left-hand side is the newer drive-in side. So it's a little hard to see, but that you can drive a car from that water line right down to the visitor center, so 18-wheelers can come up. Now, the water you see is that lovely Bahamian blue color, and the reason it gets that way is granite has 3 main minerals. It has quartz, feldspar, and mica, and a lot of those have silica in it. Now, this water is natural. It's just rain, snow, and there's underground water that comes through the rock, through cracks, and just through the pores itself. And it's under tremendous pressure. And when it comes out, it does something called degassing. And that's the same as when you twist open a soda bottle. You don't see the carbon in there until you've released the pressure. And all that pressure release kind of helps hold that granite dust in suspension. And that's how you get that really neat color. Now, when they started quarrying here in Vermont, it really started in about the 1825s. Before then, people took some out for decorations, but it really was more of a nuisance for the farmers. Dimensional quarrying, and that's these large blocks that they take out, didn't get started until the 1930s. And the people that took that out was mostly immigrants from Scotland. Over in Scotland, you have Aberdeen, Scotland. It's known as the Old World Granite Capital of the world. So when they came over, they recognized quality granite. They knew what to do with it. So they started to take it out to make gristmill wheels and cobble for cobblestone roads. Now, at that time, when they started to remove all the granite, you would have seen over 300 people working in a large quarry. They worked 6 days a week, year round. These men worked very hard. It was all steel on stone, and you can see in the upper picture and the lower picture how they would do this. They use something called a T-screw, and if you just think of an oversized corkscrew as how it worked, one person would hold it, 2 people would swing 8-pound hammers, and they tried to do 40 blows a minute. They would drill a row of these holes, put black powder in, blast a chunk of granite off from the quarry wall, and then the other men would rush in with 4.5-pound hammers and wedges to square up the pieces. Then they would take these pieces out, put it on a wagon, and try to go down this giant hill. Now, the observation deck is at 1,450 feet, which is about 1,000 feet above the town of Berry. So they'd load the granite onto a wagon and slowly go down this hill. And of course, in Vermont, we have 5 seasons instead of 4. That 5th one is mud season, so that poor wagon would get stuck. They'd have to wait for another team of horses to come along to hitch in the front and help pull it down the hill. Now, in 1833, they built the Vermont state capitol from granite from our quarries. It's only about 11 miles from the quarry, but took 16 hours to bring one load of granite. So it took like 5 years to build the state capitol. So the industry really didn't take off and grow because it was just so hard to get it to market. And that all really changed in the 1880s when the trains finally came to Barrie. And by 1888, the town of Barrie bought enough stock, and these people were very smart. They said, if you buy enough stock in our companies, we'll build a spur line. And so they built something called the Skyline. It was a traction railroad, same regular type of railroad, but it's all switchbacks to go up that hill. It was the steepest railroad east of the Mississippi at the time, and that was the game changer because now you could take the granite out of the ground, put it right on a train, and send it anywhere throughout the United States and Canada. The town of Barrie went from about 2,000 people to over 12,000 people, with the majority of these people were immigrants. We had the Scottish that came over. They knew how to quarry. We had the Italians that came down. They knew how to quarry, but more important, they knew how to carve. We had people from all over Europe and people from Canada that came down, and that's how Barrie became known as the granite center of the world. As time went on, we got our trains. They replaced the wedges and shims with metal ones. They started, instead of using pulleys to pull things out, they brought in trees from the Pacific Northwest to make derricks out of them. And on this lower picture, you can see a wooden derrick in the background. They could lift 30 tons with one of those. They got electric batteries to light the powder, so that should have made their life so much easier. But it didn't. All that new equipment was great for removing granite, but no one thought about safety. If these gentlemen were lucky, they stuffed cotton in their ears to deaden the sound, and that was it. They didn't have eye protection, other type of hearing protection, steel-toed boots. All that new equipment, the pneumatic machines were very noisy, causing hearing damage. It vibrated, so it caused nerve damage. Threw pieces of metal and stone into their eyes, which caused eye damage. But the worst thing it did is make dust. That silica that makes that water so cool looking blue is very dangerous. It acts like little tiny razor blades and puts holes in people's lungs. And you can see on this x-rays where it's shown up, it hardens the lungs. It makes it very hard to breathe. In the 1920s, over 80% of the workers had tuberculosis, and the life expectancy in 1928 was only 42 years. When they were working up in the quarries or even down in the manufacturing plant, it'd be so dusty, they'd be in a cloud, they couldn't see one another, and when they went home, they'd have just a coat of granite dust on them. So you could see how bad it was. So the industry knew they had a problem. The labor unions knew they had a problem, and they worked together and came up with two solutions. One is to ventilate the manufacturing plants, and the second is to put water on anything being cut or drilled. And they started doing this in the 30s, and it's great to say that our last case of silicosis was in the 1940s. And you can see it got so bad that they actually had these sanitariums where they'd send people to go to because this was kind of a one-way road. Now today, things have gotten better. We use respirating, they use water. In the 50s, trucks replaced the trains. They replaced the wooden derricks with steel derricks. The steel derricks are 160 feet tall. They can lift up to 300 tons on a boom. And on this lower left side, you can see a rock being lifted with one of those. They are electric motors. They're very quiet. And if you look very carefully, you can see all these cables in the background. And a little easier to see on the upper black and white photo. Those cables are about 1.5 inches wide, and there's over 15 miles worth of cable. They connect to each other, and they connect to the granite itself, and that keeps those derricks from wiggling, jiggling, or moving. In the 70s, they started bringing in diamond equipment like diamond saws. And by 1980s, they brought in the diamond wire saws up into the quarries. And that's how we quarry today. So today, we have, like I mentioned earlier, two sides of our quarry. The right side is the older vertical side, and the left side is the newest side, and that is the drive-in side. Now, just imagine way back, probably in the 70s, they had no water in this quarry. They worked all 600 feet down. And to get all your men and equipment, you get into this rider box you can see this young gentleman standing in. They'd attach it to one of the end of the booms, swing them out over that 600-foot hole, and slowly lower them all the way to the bottom. And it took 15 minutes to go one way. So when you start adding that up, it's 15 minutes down, 15 minutes up at the end of the day, and a half hour for lunch. They lost an hour's worth of production riding in that rider box. The other problem is when they're lifting up a stone, like we saw just before, all those men would have to go to a safety area, so we'd lose even more time. That's why they switched to the drive-in side. You can drive all your equipment up and down right to the water line. You can see the road kind of sloops around here and goes right to the top and to this area called a Duffy. Today, our workers work Monday through Friday, 7 to 3:30. They do not work year-round. They stop around the end of November. They'll start in April. The reason they stop is twofold. The first is the water reason. They need water to keep the dust down and our water lines freeze. And the second reason is they found out in the 70s that they spent more time shoveling snow than removing granite. So they decided what they do is stop, they repair equipment, they will help out around and do a little bit of skiing. They are full-time employees. Their pay just drops a little bit during that time. Now, today, we only have 13 people that work in the quarry, and that's because our equipment has gotten so large that it has replaced a lot of manpower. If you have really sharp eyes, you can actually see 2 people standing down here on the lower left. That's how big all this equipment is. So today, when they take out granite, they actually like to do it like slicing a loaf of bread. And they like to get at it from 2 sides. So the first thing they do is they'll cut this keyway right here in the center, and they're going to take out granite from either side. The next step is they're going to drill some pilot holes. And over here on the right, you can see the size of the drill with the gentleman standing next to it. They're very large. Now they're going to take that drill, they'll set it on top and drill straight down 1 level. They take another drill that looks very similar. It drills about a 4-inch hole, and they're going to drill right along that quarry wall where that edge is, and they make a capital L. Then they're going to go in that keyway notch and drill in, and they're going to hit that capital L right in the notch. You get 2 capital L's that are connected. Those are our pilot holes. Now, once they drill those pilot holes, they're going to take this diamond wire saw and they're going to fish it through. Very unique method there. They tie a cork to the string, they flush it down with some water or air, and when it pulls out the other side, they tie it to the cable and pull it back through. Now, this cable is made out of nickel cobalt beads that have diamonds impregnated on them, and it's stainless steel covered in plastic. The reason they use diamonds is it's so much harder than granite. So here on our mole scale, your fingernail is about a 2.5. Glass is about a 5. A sharp steel knife is about 5.5. Granite is around an 8, but diamonds are a 10. They're the hardest natural substance on Earth, so it will wear down through that granite. Now what they'll do is they'll make a big loop out of the granite cable. They're going to connect it to this diamond wire saw. Notice that it's sitting on some tracks. Once they crimp it together, it makes a big loop. They turn that machine on and it spins. It can cut about 45 square feet an hour. And what they'll do is as it spins, it just wears away on the stone, and that machine will back along the track, and that will keep an even pressure on the stone, and that way it can make a nice straight cut if everything goes right. Now, they like to cut the bottom first, the side, and the back. And what they cut out is called a bench. And the granite bench that they shoot for is 40 feet long, 30 feet tall, and 17 feet thick. That weighs 1,200 tons, and that's the same as 3 loaded 747s. So that's as big as a small house, if you think of it that way. If you look very carefully, you can see one laying on its side. But after you cut this giant bench out, they need to knock it over. And what they'll do is they have two different methods. They can use bags or a payloader. Now, on the lower left is one of the metal bags. That one gets filled with water, but they also have ones made out of plastic. And if you look right here on this picture, that yellow little couple pixels there, that's one of the plastic bags. They'll slide that between the quarry wall and the bench. They inflate it, and that stone will tip over. The other method is this payloader. This has a tipping boom. They stick that little piece of metal in between the bench quarry wall. Of course, they put some dirt down because we're trying to get big blocks down. Then they will pull that over and knock it down. Now, after it gets knocked down, they are going to stand on top of that bench and cut it into smaller pieces. It's too big to do anything with. And that's exactly what they're doing right now in this upper left-hand picture. They park those cherry pickers over them. For safety reasons, the gentlemen will have safety harnesses on so they cannot fall. And they use a slot drill, and they're going to drill a row of holes called the hardway line through that granite. It's about a 3-inch hole, and they do it about 4 inches on center. Now, the reason they drill, and it's called the hardway line, is they're actually going against the grain in the granite. And this is just like the cleavage that you have when you have mica flakes, how easy it breaks in one direction. Granite has that same property, except along the quartz crystals, there's microscopic cracks. So if you're going with the cracks, it actually breaks easier than when you're going against it. So if you look at the picture on the lower right-hand side, you can see 2 blocks of granite. And one of them you can see laying on its side are the holes that go all the way through. That's the hardway line. They have to drill all the way through. It takes about 12 minutes to drill each one of those 17 feet holes. But notice on the lower block, they only drill a little ways through. They're going with that cleavage plane, so that granite's going to break nice and smooth. They drill about as thick as your thumb, and then they can split the stone nice and cleanly. And all they do is use metal wedges and shims to break those blocks. They pound those through, go back and forth. Sometimes they use a sledgehammer. Other times they'll use a 8-pound jackhammer. And as it puts more and more pressure on that stone, they will split. And what they're shooting for are pieces that are about 5 feet by 5 feet by 10 feet and weighs about 25 tons. They'll pick that up with the payloader, just like this lower picture, and they can bring it to that area called a duffy, and that's just a Scottish term for storage area. From there, they're going to look at the stone, and they're going to put a little bit of information on it with different spray paint. You can see a little bit of orange here on this one. Now, the colors represent our quality of stone. If you see black on a stone, that means it's our best quality. Then you're going to see blue. Then we reject 85% of our stone. It's not quality enough to be stone art. And again, that's like a monument, a marker. And so we do reject most of it. It's not all grout. It's not all waste. We have one more color, orange, and that's what this stone's going to go for. They'll turn into hardscape, fire pit, or roadside curbing. So the next time you're parallel parking your car, you scratch your rim, blame Rock of Ages, send them the bill. Now, once they bring these stones to the quarry, to the duffy, it can be picked up and brought right to our manufacturing plant or sold to other people that manufacture stones, granite countertops. And from there, they'll turn it into beautiful stone art. But why do they use our granite for this? Well, our granite's very special because it's very uniform. It has very few flaws. It's very hard, and it's very carvable. And the reason it has these properties, it's how it formed. To just kind of go back just a few years, if we look at some of what happened way back when, if we go, I need to make that a little smaller. Okay. Well, on our upper right, the New England area was very interested in geology. So about 650 million years ago, it kind of looked like what we had today, where we had 2 continental plates. There was a rift valley in the middle, and they were just moving apart kind of on their own. Over on the left-hand side, you had an area that was kind of shooting, had large mountains, the Graniteville event, and that was just kind of bringing dirt across to where we are today. But this plate tectonics changed. These subcontinent plates, the old ones, started moving toward each other. And instead of breaking at the end right on a continental plate, one of the oceanic plates broke in the middle. Now, what happened is that plate went down, it started some volcanic action, it thrusted up some areas, and that was called the Bronson Hill area. And that's kind of unique because that you can still find some of that here in Vermont. But what happened is it kind of kept shrinking up until that little bit of oceanic plate disappeared and it started piling and thrusting all that dirt and land onto the continental plate. Now, over time, after it hit, the continental plate stopped moving and the oceanic plate, instead of thrusting in the middle, switched over to the African side and started going underneath there. And as these things kept moving back and forth over time, that's kind of how all these neat mountains got built here in the Green Mountain areas. So today, not very exciting here geologically, but way back in the day, it was pretty neat. You kind of had things like India going on in the East Coast, where you had the Indian continents plowing into another continent. That happened here. And you also had places like Japan being made. That's these Bronson Hill formations. You had these little islands that came out, and those got shoved into where we are today. Now, on the left is a picture in the Devonian period, and you can see this is ancient North American plate. And on the lower right is a little bit of that ancestral African plate or Europe plate. In between is that Proto-Atlantic Ocean. And what happened is that slid in, squished those islands together, and that formed the Arcadia Mountains here in Vermont. And that made these huge mountains. It folded things up quite a bit. Now, here on this upper left picture is a nice little drawing of somebody did a roadside cut on an interstate. So here's about a 20-foot cliff, and they went back through with all these folded layers and drew out where they kind of extrapolated where they'd go by looking at the strikes. So by drawing up and looking at the thickness of some of the strata underneath, like the mountains in New York, they were able to figure out that the mountains here in Vermont were as high as the Himalayan mountains are today. Now, over time, what happened is these continents kind of hit and they started like a zipper from the north to the south, where they started pushing and closing, and it made some magma. That magma worked its way up some of these cracks and formed a pool and made a dome that pushed up and formed the granite plutons that you see today. And it's part of the New Hampshire Plutonic series, and that's what the Berry granite came from. Now, when it came into the Berry area, it actually came into two liquid magma forms. The first was a dark layer intrusion, and then a lighter layer intrusion came in. In this upper right picture with that big red arrow showing a little piece of that lighter intrusion into that darker granite. That's how they knew it was a liquid. Now, they also have used sound waves to measure how big this pluton is. And on our lower right shows you how big this pluton is. It's 4 miles long by 2 miles wide and 10 miles deep. Now, at our current rate of removal, it takes about 2 weeks to knock one of those benches down by drilling your pilot holes, cutting with the diamond wire saw, and then knocking it down and cutting it up into a saw block. And so if we use 2 weeks as our current rate of removal, the granite's going to last another 4,500 years. The last thing to kind of point out on this one is our granite really isn't a granite. It has a high quartz content, and feldspar has more sodium calcium in it. And for a geologist, that's going to put it in the area that it's more of a granodiorite instead of a granite. But in the layman's term and just in Rock of Ages, kind of like the manufacturing plant, if it's made out of feldspar quartz, and it's usually granite. Now, our granite and our Berry area came out just at the right time. It hit the Goldilocks zones. The crystals, when it cooled, that magma was underground, it cooled slowly enough so the crystals didn't get too large or too small. So that made it very carvable. Because if your granite crystals are too large, you can't get the delicate noses and roses. And if it's too small, it kind of comes out sandy and you can't get the details. So that hit the right zone. This pluton formed at the end of all that folding, so you don't see any large cracks in its bottom picture. There's no giant dikes going through, so it's very homogeneous. It has a very low iron content, a very high quartz content, so it's very strong, very durable. It has a low porosity, and that's how water can get into some of your stones. So a cheaper granite, even though on a nice hot day, some of your stone art is going to look like it just rained on it. And that's because that water can penetrate into these small pores and it keeps it looking wet. But the berry gray granite doesn't have that, so it stays nice and dry. And that's why it's considered the best blue-gray granite in the world. Not because the Rock of Ages just said so. It's actually the granite industry has come up together and said, that's the best granite in the world, or blue-gray granite in the world. Now, our stone is also popular for other reasons. In 2009, for instance, this upper picture is a still from the movie Star Trek, and that's a little red convertible. And in the scene, a young James T. Kirk steals his dad's red convertible, drives it at the cliff, and of course, at the last minute, he jumps out, slides, and hangs off by his fingertips, and the car goes flying over this huge cliff in the future. Well, that cliff is our very own Rock of Ages cliff that we're looking at today. Paramount came up, they spent a day filming the cliff. No actors or red cars are in the bottom of our quarry. They took all that footage to Hollywood and added all the special effects there. That's the long list of where I stole or took my photos from. And at this time, I can take any questions that anyone has.
So you don't use any countertops or anything. Friends of mine just redid their kitchen, such a production to pick their granite countertops.
Yes, it is. And we do not make any countertops here in our facilities here that's set up to do large things like monuments, markers, mausoleums. But under Rock of Ages, if you come up, fall in love with our stone, you can get it made into countertops if you go to polycore.com.
Didn't they used to use, I've toured there twice, a diesel air spalling cutting thing to cut the blocks? That
Yes.
they lit off, it was really loud. All the workers had to wear hearing protection, but you could look at the overlook and watch down there, and this machine was basically using heat and of this high temperature to kind of spall the rock off. I
Yes,
think
they
it's
did.
before they went to the wire things or something.
Yes, they did. That they did not use that very long. What it was is kind of like a flame jet. Think of basically jet fuel would go down into the holes. They'd drill a hole, then they'd lower that tip down. It would heat the stone so much that it would crack and break. The problem that they found is when they found old black powder, didn't make very good mixture. And the other problem, it was loud, expensive, and very dangerous. You could usually tell who was running the machine because they'd have burn marks through all their clothes. So that didn't last long, and they switched to the diamond wire saw and blades. Other questions?
I see that Deb Bright said she's ordered 2 tombstones from you.
Oh, nice.
Oh, so yep.
So that's our main seller point is they do make stones. Rock of Ages has 2 types of warranty. They have one that's forever. It's against marks in the stone, that water marks that I was telling you about. It's also if the polishing starts chipping off, they have money set aside for a perpetual. So if Rock of Ages, for some reason, ever went out of business, there's money set aside to fix those stones forever.
We were there in 67. Oh, I'm sorry. We were there in 67, and I can remember seeing people with pickup trucks loading up bigger hunks than what you have in your bin now
Yes.
they used to have bigger pieces?
Oh, yes. If you look in this picture, you can see some grout on the lower right-hand side, right about here. So there are pieces that are size of cars that are just piled around. It's hard to see. I didn't have any good pictures of it, but what they used to do is, especially before today, they'll take the grout. There's over on our left-hand side, they actually grind it up. They make it into pea stones. They use it for railroad beds, riprap, and especially with all the flooding Vermont has, they will give it away for fill. So people can come up and get that. There was a nice gentleman this year who came up and he had 2 horses that passed away and was making his own monuments for them. And they actually just gave him these huge blocks that he loaded in his truck to take the grout away. So they do have some big pieces and we do use it some. The other neat thing is if you come up, you'll see these huge piles on the side of the road. They've been there right on the edge of the quarry. It's a lot of work to move these grout piles. When they first started cleaning this out, what they would do is they had railroad cars. They'd load that up, drive to the top of the grout pile and dump these giant piles left, right, and behind and build the piles bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, over time, trees grow over them and you'll be walking for a hike and you'll look and you won't even realize that you walked up one of these giant grout piles.
How many more years of life do you have in that quarry yet?
The quarry that we're looking at our current rate of removal, they think it's going to last 4,500 more years. So what you see taken out in this giant hole, it's about 300 feet across. They roughly say they took out about 1% of it. Each time they take out one of these benches, the geologist on site says it's about the same as taking a cup of water out of Lake Champlain.
Wow. Jeez. Amazing. That was a great program, Shane. That was perfect.
Well, good.
So
We did good and we did everyone proud then.
and I see that Diana did give you the thumbs up that you did a great job. So you passed the mustard.
Good.
Well done from the crowd.
Good. It's really neat to see in person. So if anyone is in Central Vermont, it's definitely worth coming up to see.
Great job.
Yeah, we have a few people that commented about a great presentation. So
And we have different tour guides. Each person's tour is a little bit different. Just because of people's personalities. I know last year we had somebody who used to work in the quarry. And they could tell you how it felt to touch the equipment. The other person that was there used to really big into the history, and she would weave a wonderful story about the immigrant. So it's very neat to see the different stories that people say.
so are your tours held every day between certain hours or?
Yes, so we do tours. They start in the spring, weather dependent, of course. We do it Monday through Friday. They do 4 tours a day. And usually they'll start on Saturday. Once they get enough staff, we'll do a couple tours on Saturday. I do recommend the Monday through Friday. The quarries are usually more active. Saturday, the quarrymen do not work. So it's usually kind of quiet. If you want to try to see something, it's usually interesting that way. Especially if you're interested in the factory, it's very neat to see them moving those markers and monuments around. It's almost worth seeing that. Big equipment. They have cranes that pick up, move the stones because the granite weighs about 80 pounds a cubic foot. That's the size of a basketball. So when you think of just a regular tombstone, that's a couple 100 pounds easily. How they choreograph moving those around. The stone art that they do, they use sand blasting. So you get to watch them do some sand blasting. Put the rubber mat down to keep the surface clean while they sandblast those roses onto it and they move. Just neat watching that.
I have a couple of questions that just came in here. Was any of this granite used at the Gettysburg battlefield for monuments?
Good question. I haven't heard about that area. Some of ours, 9/11, I think they had Harriet Tubman. Our granite, the Rock of Ages, Barry granite was used in the Hong Kong airport. They did their floors. Uh, the Bethel is very popular. They did the La Grande Arch in France. It was originally done in marble, but they found that marble was so soft it started falling off. They spent 3 years to find a replacement, and they chose our Bethel White, which is just 40 miles south of Barry, Vermont.
Okay. And another question, if I wanted to build Stonehenge in my backyard, how much does one of those blocks cost?
Good question. For a cubic foot in 2015, it was $35 for just the berry gray. The Bethel White was a little bit more expensive, and that was $50. And that's in 2015 was the last time they told us. But you can go right to polycore.com and say, I want a block, and somehow get it delivered right to your house. So you can have them help you set it up and make your own Stonehenge.
Wow. And how much is a tour?
Last year, I think it was $8. I do believe they're raising the price a little bit. That was at least some of the talk I heard at the end of the year.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Usually if you come for a tour, there's a wonderful movie at our visitor center. At the visitor center, you can buy granite products. You can also look at it's also a Rock of Ages stone. So if someone's interested in a tombstone, you can go there. You can see the factory, that's free. Do some bowling, that's free. Then you follow in your car. It's about a 3-mile drive. You go to an observation deck where you overlook that E.L. Smith quarry, look down inside, and kind of do the same tour that we just kind of did, but it's a little bit neat to see in person. Sometimes they're doing some neat things, like they'll take big pieces of grout and they're being a little lazy. Instead of bringing it all over to grind it up into pea stones, they just throw it off with their payloader down into the water below. It makes a huge splash. Everyone's excited. And if they do it a couple times in a row, it makes a very hard tour because no one wants to listen to you. They want to just watch.
If I come up there, I want a bowl.
Yes, that's very neat. And the bar is set pretty high. Last year, I've seen somebody, they videoed our ball made out of rubbers. They threw it, it bounced twice, and then they got a strike. So the bar is set pretty high for some neat trick shots.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Shane. Great program you did there. We
Well, thank you, everyone.
very much. Before I let you go, just to let you know that geologists aren't perfect, but all their faults are stress related.
Hmm. That is true.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So just think about that, right? Yeah. So anyway, don't forget we put our Zoom Rock Room videos on jonesgeo.com under the Zoom Rock Rooms. The whole library is there. We have one tucked in there that wasn't a Zoom Rock Room. It's the I told you about, I think last time, the NR1 sinkhole video where a submarine went down into the NR1 sinkhole off the Keys coastline in Florida, and some really cool deep ocean video. So we put that on there for our buddy John Lom that did a program for us a couple years ago on the NR1 sinkhole, and that's gotten a lot of views here in the last 3 weeks. A lot of people have actually viewed that, so that's in the library too. But you can always review these programs, or if you haven't played the Christmas game video yet, of course that's there. So next time, the next program, instead of going north, we're heading south to Easter Island with Mr. Ken. And I'll have announcements for you also about a upcoming program that I'll be doing in February, and we hope to have more information on the bus trip by the Institute. So you can start to register for that if you want to go on that day-long bus trip. So Melanie never was able to get in here. So next time you see her, we'll have to give her a little bit of a hard time. She'll get a pay and reduction for not being here tonight. But anyway, thank you again, Shane, for
Thanks,
a
Shane.
great program.
Thank
Diana,
you.
you get credit for getting Shane here. So
Thanks, Shaw.
we'll
You're welcome. I hope you guys enjoyed.
and we will see you the first Saturday in February already. So be safe out there, stay warm, don't shovel too much snow, and we'll see ya.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Shane.
Good night.
Good night.
We'll see ya.
Night, Melody.
Good to see you, Dick.
You too.
Next time.
Good night.